replace the battery in there, didn't they?
Yeah, maybe somebody's picking
Okay, now, call the meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Here.
Mary Jane Thomas.
Here.
Rick Van Winkle.
Here.
Dallas Eber.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Here.
Gene Davis.
Here.
Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes from the April meeting? Is there any questions or additions to them?
Make a motion, we approve minutes from April meeting.
Have a second.
Second.
Roll call.
Gene Davis.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Yes.
Rick Van Winkle.
Yes.
Dallas Eber.
Yes.
Earl Mullins.
Staying over here.
Mary Jane Thomas.
Yes.
Has everyone had a chance to look over the warrants and payroll timesheets? Is there any questions?
Make a motion, we accept the payroll time sheet minutes.
Second.
Roll call.
Mary Jane Thomas.
Yes.
Dallas Abrams.
Yes.
Gene Davis.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Yes.
Earl Mullins.
Yes.
Rick Van Winkle.
Yes.
I need a motion to approve the transfer of police revenue from general fund to police fund, in the amount of $413.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Dallas.
Me or Rick?
Mary Jane Thomas.
Yes.
Rick Van Winkle.
Yes.
Gene Davis.
Yes.
Dallas Abrams.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Yes.
Earl Mullins.
Yes.
I need a motion to approve the police fund monthly transfer of $7,100.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Gene Davis.
Yes.
Dallas Abrams.
Yes.
Mary Jane Thomas.
Yes.
Earl Mullins.
Yes.
Rick Van Winkle.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Yes. I need a motion to approve the April interest transfers.
So made.
Second.
Roll call.
Earl Mullins.
Yes.
Mary Jane Thomas.
Yes.
Dallas Abrams.
Yes.
Gene Davis.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Yes.
Rick Van Winkle.
Yes.
Susan Skips isn't going to be here tonight, but she would see the message there. There'll be a second public hearing on May 4th at 2 p.m. in the Commissioner's office for Shady Lane and East Main projects.
Earl, can you make that? I cannot.
I'll check and see. I think I can.
Okay.
That's Thursday, right? That's the fourth Thursday?
Should be, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, fourth Wednesday.
It's Wednesday,
Oh,
I
sorry.
think.
It's May 4th, yeah.
Oh, I can make it early. Sorry, I thought it was Thursday.
Okay.
Committee reports, safety.
The police department handled 94 calls for service in April. We took 15 reports and 5 arrests. 6 citations, 18 warnings, and 4 vehicles were impounded. The only other thing I got is we have spent 44%, which is $3,134.11 for our fuel budget for this year. So it's dwindling fast at $4.15 a gallon. So that's the only thing I got.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Any questions for the Chief? Dallas or Earl, do you have anything?
Make a motion, we accept the police report as read. Safety report, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I threw that in there.
Boy, you're slick. You got it. Okay, building,
No.
streets,
No.
lights. Dallas.
Just that one report, the one up where you live at, they haven't fixed the road yet.
Yeah.
I'll check into that tomorrow, I guess. And then the one that was supposed to lay out on Lincoln Street, it was working, so
Okay.
I'll check again.
All right. Thank you. Finance Committee,
No.
sanitation, Mary Jane.
I just want to let everybody know that there's about 3 places that's being turned over to the attorney, and possibility we may have to go to court.
Okay.
That's it.
Planning, we have nothing on planning. BPA. Jim, you have anything?
Not really. We're just trying to keep up out here. We're treating about 600,000 gallons a day.
With the rain and everything
Rain
out.
and everything. We got a small leak up on Cherry Street. I think it's a service line. We're going to fix it Wednesday.
Okay.
We'll do this. Right now, we're trying to keep up with this and then we'll fix that since it's a service line.
Okay.
So, other than that, nothing.
Okay. Thank you. Next is resolution ordinance. Tax ordinance first reading.
You don't read the whole thing?
We got to read the first 22 pages.
The first what, 32?
22 is the actual ordinance itself.
Mayor, do we need to, on that agreement with the city of Hamilton that Amy told us about, got a copy of, do we need to do that in the city for the reading? Do we, any of the
That's what
agreement?
this is.
I know that there was a form, remember he gave us a, in terms of the agreement form to enter into. Do we have to do that this evening? Or can we do
No,
that
I
before the reading? Just have to do that before the final.
Yeah, we accept the final writing there in the back and all that stuff. And agree with them on that. As you all know, we decided to look into putting on an income tax of 1%. I don't think we have much choice. It's come down to the point where we're being cut so bad by the state and county that there's no way that we're going to be able to stay in existence here with the 25% cut this next year and another 25 the year after. So in order to stay and even keep our community intact, we all know what we're going to end up having to do whether we like it or not. This income tax, this one here that we looked at, we originally looked at the one from West Valley, and our attorney had a lot of issues with that one for certain reasons that they kept referring back to other ordinances that they had adopted beforehand. So what we looked at was the Greenville's income tax. We sit that down to with our attorney and also Mr. McDougal from the city of Hamilton, Income Tax Service. They went through this and there's a couple of things that they needed to make changes on. Earl and I sat down with him and we went through it page by page by page, and he explained to us what needed to be changed because of the ordinances or the resolutions, that's laws that had already been changed as of this year. So it had to be updated a little bit, wording changing a couple of things. And I think it's a very good income tax. It's been challenged in what he said over 30-some years. And it kind of suits what our village needs better, more so than what West Alex did. So this is the one that we're going to we need to adopt and go with. It is told us that we needed to read this naturally for the 3 times before we make the final decision on it. So I'm going to start off reading a few pages here, and then we'll just kind of go around and let everybody do the reading, okay?
You can have my turn.
Village of New Paris Income Tax Ordinance Number 2011-5. Levying a tax to provide funds for the purposes of general municipal operation, maintenance of equipment, extension, enlargement, and improvement of municipal services and facilities and capital improvements on all salaries, qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensations earned or received by residents of the Village of New Paris, on all salaries, qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensation earned or received by non-residents of the Village of New Paris, for work done or services performed or rendered in the Village of New Paris, on the net profits earned on all businesses, professions, and other activities conducted by the residents of the Village of New Paris, on the net profits earned on all businesses, professions, and other activities conducted in the Village of New Paris by non-residents, and on the net profits earned by all corporations doing business in the Village of New Paris as a result of work done or services performed or rendered in the Village of New Paris, requiring the filing of returns and furnishings of information by the employers and all those subject to said tax, imposing on employers the duty of collecting the tax at the source and paying the same to the Village of New Paris, providing for the administration, collection, and enforcement of said tax, declaring violation thereof to be a misdemeanor and imposing penalties therefore, be ordained by the Council of the Village of New Paris, State of Ohio, that Section 1 purpose, to provide funds for the purpose of general municipal operations, maintenance, new equipment, extension, enlargement of municipal services and facilities, and capital improvements of the Village of New Paris, there shall be and is hereby levied a tax on qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensation earned or received and on the net profits and other taxable income as hereinafter provided. Section 2, definitions. As used in this ordinance, the following words shall have the meanings ascribed to them in this section, except as and if the context clearly indicates or requires a different meaning. 1. Adjusted federal taxable income means a C corporation's federal taxable income before net operating losses and special deductions as determined under the Internal Revenue Code, but including subsequent adjustments from required additions and deductions per Ohio Revised Code, Section 78.01. Pass-through entities must compute adjusted federal taxable income as if the pass-through entity was a C corporation. This definition does not apply to any taxpayer required to file a return under Ohio Revised Code, Section 5745.03, or to the net profit from the sole proprietorship. 2. Administrator means the individual designated by the ordinance and appointed by the Village of New Paris with confirmation of council to administer and enforce the provisions of the ordinance. 3. Association means a partnership, limited partnership, S corporation, or any other form of unincorporated enterprise owned by one or more persons. 4. Board of Review means the board accredited by and constituted as provided for in Section 13. 5. Business means an enterprise, activity, profession, or undertaking of any nature conducted for profit or ordinarily conducted for profit, whether by an individual, partnership, association, corporation, or any other entity, including but not limited to the renting or leasing of property, real, personal, or mixed. 6. Village means the Village of New Paris, Preble County, Ohio. 7. Corporation means the corporation or joint stock association organized under the laws of the United States, the state of Ohio, and or any other state, territory, or foreign country or dependency. 8. Domicile means the principal residence that the taxpayer intends to use for an indefinite time and to which, whenever he is absent, he intends to return. A taxpayer has only one domicile, even though he may have more than one residence. 9. Employee means one who works for wages, salary, commission, or other types of compensation in the services of an employer. 10. Employer means an individual, partnership, association, corporation, governmental body, unit or agency, or any other entity, whether or not organized for profits, who or that employs one or more persons on a salary, wage, commission, or other compensation basis. 11. Fiscal year means an accounting period of 12 months or less, ending on any day other than December 31st. 12. Form 2106 means Internal Revenue Service. Form 2106 filed by a taxpayer pursuant to the Internal Revenue Code. 13. Generic form means an electronic or paper form designed for reporting, estimating municipal income taxes and annual municipal income tax liability, or for filing a refund claim that is not prescribed by a particular municipal corporation for the reporting that municipal corporations tax on income. Any municipality that requires taxpayers to file income tax returns, reports, or other documents shall accept for filing a generic form of such a return, report, or document if the generic form, once completed and filed, contains all of the information required to be submitted with the municipality's prescribed returns, reports, or documents. 14. Gross receipts means total income of taxpayers from whatever source derived. 15. Income from a pass-through entity means partnership income of partners, membership interests of members of a limited liability company, distributive shares of shareholders of an S corporation, or other distributive or proportionate ownership shares of income from other pass-through entities. 16. Intangible income means income of any of the following types: income yield, interest, capital gains, dividends, or other income arising from the ownership, sale, exchange, or other disposition of intangible property, including but not limited to investments, deposits, money, or credits, as those terms are defined in Chapter 5701 of the Ohio Revised Code, and patents, copyrights, trademarks, trade names, investments in real estate, investment trusts, investments in regulated investment companies, and appreciation on deferred compensation. Intangible income does not include prizes, awards, or other income associated with any lottery winnings or other similar games of chance. 17. Internal Revenue Code. Means the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, 100, Stat 20, 85, 26, USC number 1 as amended. 18, Internet. Means the International Computer Network of both federal and non-federal interoperable packet switch data networks, including the graphical subnetwork known as the World Wide Web. 19, Joint Economic Development District means district created under the Ohio Revised Code, section 715.70 through 715.83, as amended from time to time. 20, Limited Liability Company means a limited liability company formed under Chapter 1705 of the Ohio Revised Code for under the laws of another state. 21, Municipality means the village of New Paris, Brown County. 22, Net profit for a taxpayer other than an individual means adjusted federal taxable income, and net profit for a taxpayer who is an individual means the individual's profit other than amounts described in Division F of Section 3 required to be reported on Schedule C, Schedule E, or Schedule F. 23, non-qualified deferred compensation plan. Means a compensation plan described in Section 3121B2C of the Internal Revenue Code. 24, non-resident means an individual domiciled outside the village of New Paris. 25, non-resident incorporated business entity means an incorporated business entity not having an office or place of business within the village of New Paris. 26, non-resident unincorporated business entity means an unincorporated business entity not having an office or place of business within the village of New Paris. 27, other payer means any person other than an individual's employer or the employee's agent that pays an individual any amount included in the federal gross income of the individual. 28, owner means a partner of a partnership, a member of a limited liability company, a shareholder of an S corporation, or other person with an ownership interest in a pass-through entity. 29, owner's proportionate share with respect to each owner of a pass-through entity means the ratio of A, the owner's income from the pass-through entity that is subject to taxation by the municipal corporation, B, the total income from that entity of all owners whose income from the entity is subject to taxation by that municipal corporation. 30, pass-through entity means a partnership, limited liability company, S corporation, or any other class of entity, the income or profits from which are given pass-through treatment under the Internal Revenue Code. 31, person includes individuals, firms, companies, business trusts, estates, trusts, partnerships, limited liability companies, associations, corporations, governmental entities, and any other entity. 32, place of business means any bona fide office other than a mere statutory office, factory, warehouse, or other space which is occupied and used by the taxpayer in carrying on any business activity individually or through one or more of his regular employees regularly in attendance. 33, principal place of business means in the case of an employer having headquarters activities at a place of business within a taxing municipality, the place of business at which the headquarters is situated. In the case of any employer not having its headquarters activities at a place of business within a taxing municipality, the term means the largest place of business located in a taxing municipality. 34, qualified plan means a retirement plan satisfying the requirements under Section 401 of the Internal Revenue Code as amended. 35, qualifying wages means wages as defined in Section 3121A of the Internal Revenue Code without regard to any wage limitations, adjusted in accordance with Section 718.03A of the Ohio Revised Code. 36, resident means an individual domiciled in the village of New Paris. 37, resident incorporated business entity means an incorporated business entity whose office, place of operations, or business situs is within the village of New Paris. 38, resident unincorporated business entity means an unincorporated business entity having an office or place of business within the village of New Paris. 39, return preparer means any person other than a taxpayer that is authorized by a taxpayer to complete or file an income tax return, report, or other document for or on behalf of the taxpayer. 40, rules and regulations means the rules and regulations as set forth in this ordinance. 41, Schedule C means Internal Revenue Service Schedule C filed by a taxpayer pursuant to the Internal Revenue Code. 42, Schedule E means Internal Revenue Service E, filed by a taxpayer pursuant to the Internal Revenue Code 43, Schedule F, means Internal Revenue Service, Schedule F, filed by a taxpayer pursuant to the Internal Revenue Code 44, S corporation, means a corporation that has made an election under Subchapter S of Chapter 1 of Subtitle A of the Internal Revenue Code for its taxable year. 45, tax administrator, means the person appointed to administer the municipality's income tax ordinance and to direct the operation of the municipal income tax department, or the person executing the duties of the tax administrator. 46, taxable income, means qualifying wages paid by an employer or employer's compensation for personal services, other income defined by statute as taxable and or adjusted federal taxable income from the operation of a business, profession, or other enterprise or activity adjusted in accordance with the provisions of this ordinance. 47, taxable year, means the corresponding tax reporting period as prescribed for the taxpayer under the Internal Revenue Code. 48, taxing municipality, means a municipality levied a tax on income earned by non-residents working within such municipality or on income earned by its residents. 49, taxpayer, means a person subject to a tax on income levied by a municipal corporation. Taxpayer does not include any person that is a disregarded entity or a qualifying subchapter S subsidiary for federal income tax purposes, but taxpayer includes any other person who owns the disregarded entity or qualifying subchapter S subsidiary. B, the singular shall include the plural, the masculine shall include the feminine and the neuter, and all person periods set forth shall be inclusive of the first and last mentioned dates. Jane, you want to go from there?
No.
Come on, Jane.
Section 3, imposition of tax. A, basis of imposition, to provide for the purposes of general municipal operations, maintenance, new equipment, and capital improvements of the Village of New Paris, there is hereby levied a tax at a rate of 1% per annum upon the following. 1, on all qualifying wages, commissions, other compensation, and other taxable income earned or received by residents of the Village of New Paris. 2, on all qualifying wages, commissions, other compensation, and other taxable income earned or received by non-residents for work done or services performed or rendered in the Village of New Paris. 3, on the portion attributable to the Village of New Paris of the net profits earned by all resident unincorporated businesses, pass-through entities, professions, or other activities derived from work done or services performed or rendered, and business or other activities conducted in the Village of New Paris. On the portion of the distributed share of the net profits earned by a resident owner of a resident unincorporated business entity or pass-through entity not attributable to the Village of New Paris and not levied against such an unincorporated business entity or pass-through entity. 4, on the portion attributable to the Village of New Paris on the net profits by all non-resident unincorporated businesses, pass-through entities, professions, or other activities derived from work done or services performed or rendered, and business or other activities conducted in the Village of New Paris, whether or not such unincorporated business entity has an office or place of business in the Village of New Paris. On the portion of the distributed share of the net profits earned by a resident owner of a non-resident unincorporated business entity or pass-through entity not attributable to the Village of New Paris and not levied against such unincorporated business entity or pass-through entity. 5, on the portion attributable to the Village of New Paris of the net profits earned by all corporations that are not pass-through entities from work done or services performed or rendered, and business or other activities conducted in the Village of New Paris, whether or not such corporations have an office or place of business in the Village of New Paris. 6, on all income received as gambling winnings as reported on IRS Form W-2G, Form 5754, and or any other form required by the Internal Revenue Service that reports reports winnings from gambling, prizes, and lottery winnings. B, businesses both in and outside the municipal boundaries. This section does not apply to taxpayers that are subject to and required to file reports under Chapter 5745 of the Ohio Revised Code. Except as otherwise provided in Division D of this section, net profit from a business or profession conducted both within and without the boundaries of a municipal corporation shall be considered as having a taxable status in such municipal corporation for purposes of municipal income taxation in the same proportion as the average ratio of the following. 1. Multiply the entire profits of the business by a business apportionment percentage to be determined by A, the average original cost of the real and tangible personal property owned or used by the taxpayer in the business or profession in such municipal corporation during the taxable period to the average original cost of all of the real and tangible personal property owned or used by the taxpayer in the business or profession during the same period, wherever situated. As used in the preceding paragraph, real property shall include property rented or leased by the taxpayer, and the value of such property shall be determined by multiplying the annual rental thereon by 8. B. Wages, salaries, and other compensation paid during the taxable period to persons employed in the business or profession for services performed in such municipal corporation, to the wages, salaries, and other compensation paid during the same period to persons employed in the business or profession wherever their services are performed, excluding compensation that is not taxable by the municipal corporation under Section 718.011 of the Ohio Revised Code. C. Gross receipts of the business or profession from sales made and services performed during the taxable period in such municipal corporation to gross receipts of the business or profession during the same period from sales and services wherever made or performed. D. Adding together the percentages determined in accordance with subsections B, 1A, B, and C hereof, or such of the aforesaid percentages as are applicable to the particular taxpayer, and dividing the total so obtained by the number of percentages used in deriving such total. 1. A factor is applicable though it may be apportioned entirely in or outside the village of New Paris. 2. Provided, however, that in the event a just and equitable result cannot be obtained under the formula provided for herein, the tax administrator, upon application of the taxpayer, shall have the authority to substitute other factors or methods calculated to effect a fair and proper apportionment. C. As used in Division B of this section, sales made in a municipal corporation means 1. All sales of tangible personal property delivered within such municipal corporation, regardless of where title passes, is shipped or delivered from a stock of goods within such municipal corporation. 2. All sales of tangible personal property delivered within such municipal corporation, regardless of where title passes through, transported from a point outside such municipal corporation, if the taxpayer is regularly engaged through its own employees in the solicitation or promotion of sales within such municipal corporation and the sales result from such solicitation or promotion. 3. All sales of tangible personal property shipped from a place within such municipal corporation to purchasers outside such municipal corporation, regardless of where title passes, if the taxpayer is not, through its own employees, regularly engaged in the solicitation or promotion of sales at a place where delivery is made. D. Except as otherwise provided in Division E of this section, net profit from rental activity not constituting a business or profession shall be subject to tax only by the municipal corporation in which the property generating the net profit is located. E. This section does not apply to individuals who are residents of the village of New Paris and except as otherwise provided in section 718.01 of the Ohio Revised Code, the Village of New Paris may impose a tax on all income earned by residents of the Village of New Paris to the extent allowed by the United States Constitution. F, net operating loss, NOL. 1, the portion of a net operating loss sustained in any taxable year, a portion to the Village of New Paris, may be applied against the portion of the profit of succeeding tax years, a portion to the Village of New Paris, until exhausted, but in no event for more than the 3 taxable years immediately following the year in which the loss occurred. No portion of a net operating loss shall be carried back against the net profits of any prior year. 2, the portion of the net operating loss sustained shall be apportioned to the Village of New Paris in the same manner as provided herein for apportioning net profits to the Village of New Paris. 3, the tax administrator shall provide by rules and regulations the manner in which such net operating loss carried forward shall be determined. 4, the net operating loss of a taxpayer that loses its legal identity by any such means as merger or consolidation shall not be allowed as a carry-forward loss deduction to the surviving or new taxpayer. 5, the net operating loss sustained by a business or profession is not deductible from employee earnings, but may be carried forward as provided in subsection F. However, if a taxpayer is engaged in 2 or more taxable business activities to be included in the same return, the net loss of one unincorporated business activity, except any portion of a loss reportable for municipal income tax purposes to another municipality, may be used to offset the profits of another for purposes of arriving at overall net profits.
G, consolidated returns. 1, consolidated return may be filed by a group of corporations who are affiliated through stock ownership. If that affiliated group filed for the same tax period, a consolidated return for federal income tax purposes pursuant to section 1501 of the Internal Revenue Code. A consolidated return must include all companies that are so affiliated. 2, once a consolidated return has been filed for any taxable year, consolidated returns shall continue to be filed in a subsequent years unless the applicable requirements of the rules and the regulations for discontinuing the filing of consolidated returns have been met. H, exclusions. The provisions of this ordinance shall not be construed as levying tax upon the following. 1, proceeds from welfare benefits, unemployment insurance, Social Security benefits, and qualified retirement plans as defined by the Internal Revenue Service. 2, proceeds of insurance, annuities, workers' compensation insurance, permanent disability benefits, compensation for damage or personal injury, and like reimbursements not including damages for loss of profits and wages. 3, dues, contributions, and similar payments received by charitable, religious, educational organizations, or labor unions, trade or professional associations, lodges, and similar organizations. 4, gains from involuntary conversion, cancellation of indebtedness, interest and federal obligations, and income of a decedent's estate during the period of administration, except such income from an operation of a business. 5, alimony. 6, compensation for damages to property by way of insurance or otherwise. 7, interest and dividends from intangible property. 8, military pay or allowances of members of the Armed Forces of the United States and members of their reserve components, including the Ohio National Guard, ORC 718.01. 9, income from services performed by the spouse of a service member shall not be deemed to be income or services performed or from services within a taxing jurisdiction of the United States if spouse is not a resident or domiciliary of the jurisdiction in which the income earned because the spouse is in the jurisdiction solely to be with the service member serving in compliance with military orders. 10, Income of any charities, educational, fraternal, or other type nonprofit association, organization enumerated in Ohio Revised Code 718.01, to the extent that such income is derived from tax-exempt real estate, tax-exempt tangible or intangible property, or tax-exempt activities. 11, any association, organization falling in this category listed in the preceding paragraph receiving income from non-exempt real estate, tangible or intangible personal property, or business activities of a type ordinarily conducted for profit by taxpayers operating for profit shall be excluded hereunder. 12, in the event of any association or organization that receives taxable income as provided in the preceding paragraph from real or personal property ownership or income producing businesses located both within and without the corporation limits of the Village of New Paris, it shall calculate income apportionated to the Village of New Paris under the methods provided above. 13, if exempt from federal income tax purposes, fellowships and scholarships grants are excluded from municipal income tax. 14, the rent value of a home furnished to a minister of a gospel as part of his compensation, or the rental allowance paid to a minister of the gospel as part of his compensation, to the extent used to him to rent or provide a home pursuant to the section 107 of the Internal Revenue Code. 15, compensation paid under section 3501.28 or 3501.36 of the Ohio Revised Code to a person serving as a precinct official, to the extent that such compensation does not exceed $1,000 annually. Such compensation in excess of $1,000 may be subject to taxation. The payer of such compensation is not required to withhold municipal tax for that compensation. 16, compensation paid to an employee of a transit authority, regional transit authority, or a regional transit commissioner created under Chapter 306 of the Ohio Revised Code for operating a transit bus or other motor vehicle for authority or commission in through the Village of New Paris, unless the bus vehicle is operated on a regularly scheduled route. The operator is subject to tax by region of residence or domicile in the Village of New Paris, or the headquarters of the authority or commission is located within the Village of New Paris. 17, the Village of New Paris shall not tax the compensation paid to a non-resident individual for personal services performed by the individual in the Village of New Paris on 12 or fewer calendar days of the year, unless one of the following applies. A, the individual is an employee of another person. The principal place of business of the individual's employer is located in another municipality in Ohio that imposes a tax applying compensation paid to the individual for services paid on those days, and the individual is not liable to that other municipality for tax on the compensation paid for such services. B, the individual is a professional entertainer, professional athlete, promoter of professional entertainment or sports event, or an employee of such a promoter. All shall be reasonably defined by the Village of New Paris. 18, the income of a public utility when that public utility is subject to a tax levied under section 5727.24 or 5727.30 of the Ohio Revised Code, except a municipal corporation may tax the following, subject to Chapter 5745 of the Ohio Revised Code. A, the income of an electric company or combined company. B, the income of a telephone company. As defined in Division F17 of this section, combined company, electric company, and telephone company have the same meaning as Section 5727.01 of the Ohio Revised Code, and S corporation shareholders a distributive share of net profits or losses of the S corporation. 20. Generally, the above noted items in this section are the only forms of income not subject to the tax. Any other income, benefits, other forms of compensation shall be taxable. So I, mandatory registration. Each Each new resident of the village of New Paris shall register within the village income tax department within 30 days of residency in the village of New Paris. 2, all employers, contractors, subcontractors who do work in the village shall register with the village income tax department when work begins and shall present a list of all subcontractors and others that may do work for them. 3, all landlords who rent property or dwellings in the village of New Paris must submit on a semi-annual basis an up-to-date list of their tenants to the tax administrator. This list is not required if the tenants are responsible for their own water utility payments. 4, any person who violates this section shall be in violation of this ordinance, punishable as provided by in section 12. Section 4, effective period. Said tax shall be levied, collected, and paid within respect to salaries, qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensations earned or received, and shall be levied with respect to the net profits of the businesses, professionals, or other activities earned on or after July 1st, 2011. Section 5, return and pay of tax. A, effective with the date of this ordinance and each year thereafter, every resident taxpayer without exception and regardless of whether or not tax is due, shall make a file return on a form prescribed and by and acceptable to the tax administrator on or before April 15th of each year. When the return is made for a fiscal year or other period different from the calculated year, calendar year, I'm sorry. The return shall be filed on or before the 15th day or the 4th month following the end of the fiscal period. The tax administrator is hereby authorized to provide by regulation that return of an employer or employee showing the amount of municipal tax deducted by said employer or employees from qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensation, and other taxable income of a non-resident employee, and is paid to him by those paid to him to the tax administrator, may be accepted as the return required of a non-resident employee whose sole income subject to tax under this ordinance is a qualifying wage, commission, or other compensation and taxable income. B, a husband and wife may file either separate returns or a joint return for municipal purposes, even though one spouse has neither taxable income nor deductions included in municipal return, regardless of whether the federal, state tax were filed separately or jointly. If a joint village New Paris return is made, the tax shall be computed on the aggregate taxable income, and the liability with respect to the tax shall be joint and several. C, the return shall be filed with the tax administrator on a form or forms furnished and obtainable upon request from the tax administrator, or on a generic form. If the generic form, when completed and filled, contains all the information required to be submitted with the municipality's prescribed return, and if the taxpayers prepare filling out a generic form otherwise complies with the ordinance governing the filing of the return. D, the return shall set forth 1, the aggregate amounts, qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensations received, allocated, apportioned, and set aside other income defined by statute as taxable and gross income from any business, profession, or other activity, less allowable expenses incurred in the acquisition of such gross income earned during the preceding year and subject to said tax, and 2, the amount of the tax imposed by this ordinance on such earnings and profits. 3, such other pertinent statements, information, returns, copies of federal and or state tax returns and/or schedules of the other information as the tax administrator may require, including a statement that figures used in the return are the figures used in the federal income tax, adjusted and set forth only such income as taxable under provisions of this ordinance. E, extensions. 1, any taxpayer who requests an extension for filing federal income tax may request an extension for filing of a municipal tax, income tax return by filing a copy of the taxpayer's federal extension request with the municipal tax division. Any taxpayer not required to file federal income tax return may request an extension for filing municipal income tax return in writing. All requests for extensions must be filed on or before the original date of the annual return. If the request is granted, the extension due date of the municipal income tax return shall be the last day of the month following the month to which the due date of the federal income tax has been extended. 2. The tax administrator may deny a taxpayer request for extension if the taxpayer A, fails to timely file a report request, or B, owes municipality any delinquent income tax penalty, interest, or other charges for late payment or non-payment of income tax, or C, has failed to file any required income tax return, report, or other related documents for a prior tax period. 3. Granting an extension for filing municipal tax returns does not extend the due date as providing in this section for payment of the tax. Hence, penalty and interest may apply for any unpaid tax during the period of extension at a rate set forth in Section 10. No penalty shall be assessed in those cases in which the return is filed and the final tax paid within extension period. All other filing payment required of the ordinance have been met. Any extension by the tax administrator will be granted upon condition that the declaration filing the payment requirements have been fulfilled. However, upon further examination, it becomes evident that the declaration filing payment requirements have not been fulfilled. Penalty and interest may be assessed in full and in the same manner, though no extension has been granted. F. Payments with return. The taxpayer making the return shall, at the time of the filing thereof, pay to the tax administrator the amount of taxes shown as due. However, credit shall be allowed for A, any portion of the tax due which shall have been deducted at a source pursuant to the provision of Section 6, and B, any portion of the said tax which shall have been paid by the taxpayer pursuant to the provision of Section 7, and C, credit to the extent allowed by Section 15 for the tax paid to another municipality. 2, subject to the limitations contained in Section 11 of this ordinance, any taxpayer who has overpaid the amount of tax to the village of New Paris is entitled, under the provisions of this ordinance, and may have such overpayment applied against any subsequent liability hereunder or at his election indicated in this return. Such overpayment or part thereof shall be refunded, provided there are no additional taxes or refunds of less than $5 shall be collected or refunded. 3, the mere submission of a return report of a tax liability shall constitute filing unless accompanied by the required payment. G, amendment returns. 1, when necessary, an amendment return shall be filed in order to report additional income and pay any additional tax due, or claim a refund tax overpaid, subject to requirements and/or limitations contained in Section 11 and 15. The tax administrator shall provide by regulation in the format in which such amendment return shall be filed. A taxpayer may not change the method of the accounting or apportionment of the net profits after the due date for filing of the original return. 2, within 3 months of the final determination of any federal tax liability affecting the taxpayer's municipal tax liability, such taxpayers shall make and file an amended municipal return showing income subject to the municipal tax based upon such final determination of the federal tax liability, and pay any additional tax shown due thereon, or make claim for refund of any overpayment. H, information returns. Schedules and statements required to support tax returns which are incomplete without such information shall be filed within the time limits set forth. The filing of the tax returns and failure to file such information returns schedule statements shall be a violation of this ordinance, provided, however, that the taxpayer shall have 20 days after the notification by the tax administrator or his authorized representative to file the items required by this paragraph. Section 6, collection at source. A, withholding by employer. Each employer within or doing business within the Village of New Paris who employs one or more persons on a salary, wage, commission, or other compensation basis shall deduct, when such salary, wage, commission, and other compensation is paid, allocated, apportioned, or set aside, the tax at the rate provided in this section 3 hereof of the qualifying wages due by such employer to each such employee, and shall, on or before the 15th day of the month following such withholding, make a return and pay the tax administrator the amount of taxes so deducted. The return shall be on a form or forms prescribed by acceptable to the tax administrator and shall be subject to the rules and regulations prescribed by the tax administrator. Such employer shall be liable for payment of tax required and to be deducted and withheld, whether or not such taxes have been in fact withheld. B, an employer is not required to make any withholding within respect to an individual's disqualifying disposition of an incentive stock option. If at that time the disqualifying disposition of the individual is not an employee of the corporation with respect to the stock option has been issued. C, 1, an employee is not relieved from liability for tax by the failure of the employer to withhold tax as required by the municipal corporation or by the employer's exemption from the requirement to withhold the tax. 2, failure of any employer to remit to the municipal corporation the tax withheld relieves the employee from liability for that tax unless the employee colluded with the employer in connection with the failure to remit the tax withheld. D, so long as the taxes withheld by the employer or Village of New Paris during the measurement period are less than $300 per month or $3,600 annually, payments may be made quarterly on or above the 15th day of the month following the end of each quarter, subject to the approval of the tax administrator. The tax administrator may revoke the approval of quarterly filing payments whenever the tax administrator has reason to believe that the conditions for granting such authorization have changed. Where judged incorrectly, where were not met, or when it is best interest of the Village of New Paris to do so. Notice of withdrawal shall be made in writing, and in such case, the employer must begin to file in accordance with this section. E, employer considered as trustee. Each employer in collecting such tax shall be deemed to hold the same until payment is made by such employer to the Village of New Paris as a trustee of the benefit of the Village of New Paris. And such tax collected by such employer from employees shall, until the same is paid to the Village of New Paris, be deemed a trust fund in the hands of such employer. Each employer shall be liable for the payment of tax required to be deducted and withheld, whether or not such tax in fact has been withheld.
60 to go.
Yeah. Any person who is required to withhold tax from qualifying wages shall pay all such tax to the Village of New Paris in accordance with the provisions of this section. And the event taxes withheld from qualifying wages of the employees are not paid to the Village of New Paris in accordance with the provisions of this section, all officers, members, managers, employees, and trustees having control or supervision or charged with responsibility of filing the return and making payment are jointly and severally, personally liable for the tax not returned or paid to the Village of New Paris, as well as any related interest penalties. Are also liable under the provisions of Section 12 hereof. The dissolution, termination, or bankruptcy of a corporation, limited liability company, business, trust that does not discharge officers, members, managers, employees, trustees, liability for a future or a failure of the corporation, limited liability company, or the business trust to file returns or pay said taxes. G, this is my last page. Withholding return, list of employees. Each employer shall file a withholding tax reconciliation showing the sum of the total compensation paid to all employees, a portion of which, if any, was not subject to withholding, along with the explanation for the same, and the portion of which subject to withholding, together with the amount of such withholding remitted, return shall include information concerning each employee from whom the municipal tax was withheld, showing the name, address, zip code, social security number of each employee, the total amount of compensation paid during the year, and the amount of municipal tax withheld. If the total tax withheld from any employee includes tax withheld and remitted from another municipality, the amount of the same shall be separately shown on the return of the information of the village of New Paris concerning each employee. The withholding tax reconciliation shall be filed by each employer on or before February 28th, following the end of such calendar year.
Who wants to go after
It's your turn.
Question. May I address the council, please, before this gets voted on?
We're not voting on this tonight.
This
This is
is
the first reading.
Okay, but it wasn't posted to the public. My question is, what does the Chamber, the Kiwanis, and my friend Marcus think of this proposal? Marcus Brubaker. I mean, all these people are going to be concerned.
They all
It was in the village news, but this is the first reading, and then we post it.
Okay, well, I didn't see the village press, sorry.
Go ahead, Rick.
And Mr. Brubaker has been made aware of it, as I did it personally.
Good, thanks.
H, in addition to the wages reported requirements of this section, any person required by the Internal Revenue Service to report on Form 1099 miscellaneous payments to the individuals not treated as employees from the service performed shall also report such payment to the Village of New Paris when the services were performed in the Village of New Paris. This information may be submitted on a listing and shall include the names, addresses, social security numbers, or federal identification number and the amount of payments made. Federal Form 1099 may be submitted in lieu of such listing. The information shall be filed annually on or before February 28th following the end of such calendar year. I, domestic servants. No person shall be required to withhold the tax on the qualifying wages, commissions, and other compensations and other taxable income paid domestic servants employed exclusively in or about such person's residence. However, such domestic servants may be responsible for filing and paying their own returns and taxes. Section 7, declarations. A, requiring for filing. Every person who anticipates any taxable income which is not subject to Section 6 or who engages in any business, profession, enterprises, or activity subject to the tax imposed by Section 3 shall file a declaration for such estimated income or the estimated profits or loss from such business activity together with the estimated tax due upon thereof, if any. Provided, however, if a person's income is wholly from qualifying wages from which the tax will be withheld and remitted to the Village of New Paris in accordance with Section 6 hereof, or the estimated tax due is $200 or less, such person need not file a declaration. B, dates for filing. 1, such declaration shall be filed on or before April 15th of each year during the life of this ordinance, or on before the 15th day of the 4th month following taxpayer becomes subject to the tax for the first time. 2, those taxpayers having a fiscal year of period differing from the calendar year shall file a declaration on before the 15th day of the 4th month following the start of each financial year or period. C, forms credit for the tax withheld or paid another municipality. 1, such declaration shall be filed upon a form furnished by or obtained from the tax administrator or an accepted generic form, and credit shall be taken to the municipality tax to be withheld for any portion of such income. In accordance with this provision of Section 6, credits may be taken from tax to be withheld and remitted to another taxing municipality. 2, for the taxpayers who are individually such declaration of estimated tax to be paid, the Village of New Paris shall be accompanied by a payment of at least 25% of the estimated annual tax, and at least a similar amount shall be paid on or before the last day of the 7th, 10th, and 13th month after the beginning of the taxable year. 3, for the taxpayers that are not individuals, such as declarations of estimated tax to be paid by the Village of New Paris shall be accompanied by a payment or at least 25% of the estimated annual tax, and at least a similar amount shall be paid on or before the 15th day of the 6th, 9th, 12th month after the beginning of the taxable year. 4, the mere submission of the declaration estimated tax liable shall not constitute filing unless accompanied by a requirement of payment. D, amended declarations. 1, declarations may attend at any time. 2, in the event that an amended, I can't say that word very well, declarations have been filed, the unpaid balance showed due thereof shall be paid in equal installments on or before the remaining payment dates. E, annual return required. On or before the 15th day of the 4th month of the calendar or fiscal year, an annual return shall be filed, and any balance which may be due to the Village of New Paris shall be paid therewith in accordance with the provision of Section 5. Section 8, appointments and duties of the tax administrator. A, 1, it shall be the duty of the tax administrator to collect and receive the tax imposed by this ordinance in the manner prescribed therein, to keep an accurate record thereof, and to report all monies so received. 2, it shall be the duty of the tax administrator to enforce payment of all income taxes owing the Village of New Paris, to keep accurate records for a minimum of 7 years, showing the amount due from each taxpayer required to file a declaration, thank you, I have trouble with that word for some reason. Declaration to make any returns, including a return of taxes withheld, and show the dates and amount of payments thereof. B, the tax administrator is hereby charged with the enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance, including the interpretation and the enforcement of rules and regulations set forth in Article 1 through Article 12, and is hereby empowered, subject to the approval of the Village Council, to adopt and to, help me with that one, promulgate and to enforce rules and regulations related to any matter or things pertaining to collection of taxes and the administration and enforcement of the provision of this ordinance, including the provisions of the reexamination and corrections of returns. C, in any case where a taxpayer has failed to file a return, or has filed a return which does not show the proper amount of tax due, the tax administrator may determine the amount of tax appearing to be due to the Village of New Paris from the taxpayer, may be sent to such taxpayer a written statement showing the amount of tax so determined, together with interest and penalties thereon, if any. D, subject to the contents of the majority of the Board of Review, the taxpayer shall have the power to compromise any liability imposed by this ordinance. E, upon the demonstration and documentation of good cause, the tax administrator shall have the power to compromise penalties, interest, liability imposed by this ordinance consistent with this ordinance and rules and regulations. Section 9, investigative powers of tax administrator, penalties for confidential information. A, tax administration, as tax administrator, or any of his authorized agents is hereby authorized to examine the books, paper, records, federal income tax returns of any employer, taxpayer, or any person subject to or whom the tax administrator believes is subject to the provisions of this ordinance for the purpose of verifying the accuracy of any returns made, or if no return was made to assess the tax or withholding due under this ordinance. Every such employer, supposed employer, taxpayer, or supposed taxpayer is hereby directed and required to furnish upon written request of the tax administrator or his duty of authorized agent or employee the means, facilities, and opportunity for making such examination and investigations are hereby authorized. B, the tax administrator is hereby authorized to order any person presumed to have knowledge of the facts to appear at the office of the tax administrator and to examine such person under oath concerning any income which was or should have been reported for taxation or withheld, or any transactions tend to affect such income, and for this purpose may be compelled the production of books, paper, records, federal income tax returns, and the attendance of all persons before him, whether as party or witnesses, whenever he believes such persons have knowledge of such income or information pertinent to such inquiry. C, the refusal to produce books, papers, records, federal income tax return, or the refusal to submit to such examination by any employer or person subject or presumed to be subject to the tax, or by any officer, agent, and employee of a person subject to the tax or required to withhold tax, or the failure of any person to comply with the provisions of this section, or with an order of subpoena of the tax administrator authorized hereby shall be deemed a violation of this ordinance, punishable as provided in section 12. B, every taxpayer shall retain all records necessary to compute his tax liability for a period of 7 years from the date his return is filed or the tax is required to be withheld or paid. E, any information gained as a result of returns, investigations, hearing, or verifications requiring or authorized by the ordinance shall be confidential, and no person shall disclose such information except in accordance with a proper judicial order or in connection with the performance of that person's official duties or the official business of the municipality, corporation as such by this ordinance. The tax administrator of the municipality, corporation may furnish copies of returns filed under this ordinance to the Internal Revenue Service and to the state tax commissioner. F, any person divulging such information shall be guilty of a misdemeanor of the first degree, punishable by a maximum fine of $1,000 or imprisonment for not more than 6 months or both. G, in addition to the above penalties, any employee of the Village of New Paris who violates the provision of this section relative to the disclosure of confidential information shall be guilty of an offense punishable by immediate dismissal. Section 10, interest and penalties. A, all taxes imposed and monies withheld or required to be withheld by employers under the provision of this ordinance and remaining unpaid after they become due shall bear interest at the rate of 1% per month or fractions thereof. B, in addition to interest as provided in paragraph A hereof, penalties are hereby imposed as following. 1, for failure to pay taxes due other than taxes withheld, 10% of unpaid balance. 2, for the failure to remit tax withheld or required to be withheld from employees, 5% per month, a fraction thereof. 3, where the taxpayer has failed to file a declaration on which he has estimated and paid a tax equal to or greater than the tax paid from the previous year, or where he has filed a previous return and has failed to file a declaration of which he has estimated and paid a tax equal to or greater than 90% of the actual tax for the year, or has failed to file a return and pay the total tax on or before the end of the month following the end of the taxable year, 10% of the difference between the 90% and the actual tax for this year, and the amount paid through withholding the declaration. 4, any person required to file a return as set forth in this ordinance who fails to file said return as set forth herein shall pay a late filing fee of $25 if said return is filed no more than 30 days past its due date. In the event such return is filed more than 30 days past its due date, said person shall pay a late filing fee of $50. It shall be no defense in the payment of such penalties, and that no tax shall be due to be paid to the Village of New Paris, or that a refund is due to pay to the taxpayer as a result of this filing of such return. C, exceptions. Penalty shall not be assessed on an additional tax assessment made by the tax administrator when a return has been filed in good faith and the tax paid thereon within the time prescribed by the tax administrator, and provided further that in the absence of fraud, neither penalty nor interest shall be assessed on any additional assessments resulting from a federal audit provided by amended returns and filed. The additional tax is paid within 3 months after the final determination of the federal tax liability. D, upon recommendation of the tax administrator, the Board of Review may abate penalties, interest, and or late filing fees, or upon an appeal from the refusal of the tax administrator to recommend abatements of the penalties, interest, and or the late filing fees concerning an item of income or expense. The board may nevertheless abate penalties, interest, and or the late filing fees. E, tax administrator is hereby given the authority to take abates any of the penalties imposed by this section upon written request of the taxpayer and subject to revision of this section. Such abatements is authorized whether in full or in part. The tax administrator may promulgate rules and regulations governing abatements of penalties. Section 11, collection of unpaid taxes and refunds of overpayments. A, all taxes imposed by this ordinance shall be collected together with any interest and penalties thereon by civil action at law. No additional assessment shall be made after 3 years from the time the tax was due or the return was filed, whichever is later, provided, however, there shall be no period of limitation on an additional assessment in the case of a return that omits gross income excess of 25% of that required to be reported, or in the case of filing a false or fraudulent return with intent to evade taxes, or in the case of failure to file a return. In those cases in which the Commissioner of Internal Revenue and the taxpayer have excluded a waiver of the federal state of limitations, the period within which an additional assessment may be made by the tax administrator shall be extended 1 year from the time of the final determination of the federal tax liability. B, taxes paid shall not be refunded unless a claim for refund is made within 3 years from the date of which such payment was made, or the return was due, or within 3 months after filing determination of the federal tax liability, whichever is later. C, interest shall be allowed and paid on any overpayment municipal income tax obligation from the date of overpayment with the following exceptions. No interest shall be allowed on any overpayment that is refunded within 90 days after the final filing date of the annual return or 90 days after the complete return is filed, whichever is latter. For purpose of commuting the payment or interest on overpayment, no amount of tax for any taxable year shall be treated as having been paid before the date on which the tax return for that year was due, without regard to any extensions of time for filing that return. The interest shall be paid at the rate of interest prescribed by the Ohio Revised Code 5703-47. D. Amounts of less than $5 shall not be collected or refunded. Section 12, violations and penalties. A, any person who shall, 1, fail, neglect, or refuse to make any return or declaration required by this ordinance, or 2, not knowingly making an incomplete, false, or fraudulent return, or 3, willfully failed, neglected, or refused to pay the tax penalties and interest imposed by this ordinance, or 4, willfully failed, neglected, or refused to withhold the tax from his employees and remit such withholding tax to the tax administrator, or 5, refused to remit the tax administrator or any duly authorized agent or employee to examine his or his employer's books, records, papers, or filed income tax returns, or 6, fail to appear before the tax administrator and produce his or his employer's books, records, papers, or federal income tax returns upon order or subpoena of the tax administrator, or 7, refuses to disclose to the tax administrator any information with respect to such persons or such persons' employers' income or net profits, or 8, willfully gives to an employer by any employee false information as to his true name, correct social security number, and resident address, or the failure of such employee to promptly notify an employer of any changes in residence, address, and date thereof, or 9, failure on the part of any employer to maintain proper records of employees' residence, addresses, total wages paid, and municipal tax withheld, or to knowingly give the tax administrator false information, or 10, fail to apply to the provision of this ordinance or any order or subpoena of the tax administrator, or 11, willfully fails or willfully refuses to make any payment on the estimated tax for any year of part of any tax year as required by Section 7, or 12, fail to cause the tax to withheld from the qualified wages of employees pursuant to this ordinance to be paid to the Village of New Paris in accordance with the provision of Section 6, or 13, attempt to do anything whatever to avoid the payment of the whole or any part of the tax, penalties, interest imposed by this ordinance, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor of the first degree and shall be fined not more than $1,000 or imprisoned not more than 6 months, or both for each offense. B, statute of limitations. 1, civil action to recover municipal income tax and penalties and interest on municipal income taxes shall be brought within 3 years after the tax was due or the return was filed, whichever is latter. 2, prosecution of the offense made punishable under this ordinance shall be commenced within 3 years after the commission of offense, provided that in the case of fraud, failure to file a return, or the omission of 25% or more of income required to be reported, prosecution may be commenced within 6 years after the commission of offense, ORC 718-12. C, failure of any employer, taxpayer, or person such form shall not exclude him from making any further return or declaration from filing such form or from paying the tax. D, the term person as used in this section shall, in addition to the meaning prescribed in section 2, include in the case of an association or a corporation not having any partner, member, or officer within the Village of New Paris, any employee or agent of such association or corporation who can be found within the corporate limits of the Village of New Paris. Section 13, Board of Review. A Board of Review consisting of 3 members to be appointed by the mayor and approved by the council is hereby created and shall be maintained to hear appeals. The members of the Board of Review shall be appointed for a term of 3 years. However, the member of the first Board of Appeals shall be appointed for 1, 2, and 3 years respectively. A majority of the members of the board shall constitute a quorum. The board shall adopt its own procedures, rules, and shall keep a record of its transactions. Any hearing by the board shall be conducted privately, and the revisions of section 9 within reference to the confidential character or information required to be disclosed by ordinance shall apply to such matters as may be heard before the board on appeal. B, all rules, regulations, amendments, or changes thereto which are adopted by the tax administrator under the authority conferred by this ordinance must be approved by the village council before the same becomes effective. After such approval, such rules, regulations, amendments, and changes shall be filed with the clerk of council and shall be open to the public inspection. The board shall hear and pass an appeal for any ruling or decision of the tax administrator, and at the request of the taxpayer or tax administrator is empowered to substitute alternate methods of appropriateness. C, whenever the tax administrator issues a decision regarding an income tax obligation that is subject to the appeal as provided in this section over an ordinance of regulations of the Village of New Paris, the tax administrator shall notify the taxpayer in writing at the same time of the taxpayer's right to appeal the decision of the manner in which the taxpayer may appeal the decision. D, any person who is aggrieved by the decision by the tax administrator who has filed with the Village of New Paris that requires returns or other documents pertaining to the municipal income tax obligation at issue is in the decision may appeal the decision to the Board of Review by filing a request with the board. The request shall be in writing, shall state particulars why the decision should be deemed incorrect or unlawful, and shall be filed within 30 days after the tax administrator has issued the decision. E, the imposition of penalties and interest as prescribed in the codified ordinance of the Village of New Paris is not a sole basis for this appeal. Do what? Yeah, no. Next. Only 2 pages. Only 2.
The Board of Review shall schedule a hearing within 45 days after receiving the request, unless the taxpayer waives the hearing. If the taxpayer does not waive the hearing, the taxpayer may appear before the board and may be represented by an attorney at law, certified public accountant, or other representative. The board may affirm, reverse, or modify the tax administrator's decision or any part of that decision. The board shall issue a decision on the appeal within 90 days after the board's final hearing on the appeal, and send notice of its final decision by ordinary mail to all of the parties to the appeal within 15 days after issuing the decision. The taxpayer or the tax administrator may appeal the board's decision as provided in section 5717.011 of the Ohio Revised Code. Each board of review created pursuant to this section shall adopt rules governing its procedure shall keep a record of its transactions. Such records are not public records available for inspection under Section 149.43 of the Ohio Revised Code. Hearings requested by a taxpayer before Board of Review created pursuant to this section are not meetings of a public body subject to Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Vacancy on said board shall be filled by appointment by the mayor, subject to confirmation by council, and shall be for the unexpired term of the board member replaced. All terms shall begin on January 1 and end on December 31 of the appropriate year. All appointments and confirmations thereof shall state the dates of beginning and ending of the term for which the appointment is made, calculated in accordance with this section. Members of the board shall receive no compensation, but shall be allowed such amounts for actual expenses, including but not limited to mileage, as council may provide. Section 14, allocation of funds. The funds collected under the provisions of this ordinance shall be deposited on receipt in the general fund, income tax account, and shall be appropriated by the village council as follows. A, for the costs and expenses of collecting the taxes levied by this ordinance and the cost of administrating and enforcing the provisions hereof, such part of said funds may be necessary. B, the balance remaining in the income tax account shall be applied a portion and transferred by village council by and in its annual budget in such proportions as council may from time to time determine and authorize. Section 15, credit for tax paid to another municipality or joint economic development district. Limitation, effective with the date of this ordinance and each year thereafter, where a resident of the village of New Paris is subject to municipal income tax imposed by another municipality, shall be allowed a credit against the tax imposed by this chapter in the amount of the tax so paid by him or in his behalf to such other municipality, not to exceed 1/2 of 1%. Credit to residents, effective with the date of this ordinance and each year thereafter, every individual taxpayer who resides in the village of New Paris who receives net profits, salaries, wages, commissions, or other personal service compensation for work done or services performed or rendered outside the village of New Paris pays a municipal income tax on the same income tax by the village of New Paris to another municipality shall be allowed a credit against the tax imposed by this chapter in the amount of the tax so paid by him or in his behalf to such other municipality not to exceed 1/2 of 1%. Credit to residents. Effective with the date of this ordinance and each year thereafter, every individual taxpayer who resides in the village of New Paris who receives net profits, salaries, wages, commissions, or other personal service compensation for work done or services performed or related or rendered outside the village of New Paris pays a joint economic development district tax as a result of joint economic development zone created under Section 715, 691, or a joint economic development district created under Section 71570, 71571, or 71572 of the Ohio Revised Code, shall be allowed a credit against the tax imposed by this chapter in the amount of the tax so paid by him or in his behalf to such another joint economic development zone or district not to exceed 1/2 of 1%. Credit to residents. Effective with the date of this ordinance and each year thereafter, every individual taxpayer who resides in the village of New Paris who receives net profits, salaries, wages, commissions, or other personal service compensation for work done or services performed or rendered outside the village of New Paris and pays a county income tax on the same income tax by the village of New Paris to another county shall be allowed a credit against the tax imposed by this chapter in the amount of the tax so paid by him or in his behalf to such other county not to exceed 1/2 of 1%. D, except as provided in Division E of this section, if a tax or withholding is paid to a municipal corporation on income or wages, and if a second municipal corporation imposes a tax on that income or wages after the time period allowed for a refund of the tax or withholding paid to the first municipal corporation, the
municipal corporation shall allow a non-refundable credit against the tax or withholding the second municipality claims is due with respect to such income or wages equal to the tax or withholding paid to the first mention of the first municipal corporation with respect to such income or wages, not to exceed 1/2 of 1%. E. If the tax rate of the second municipal corporation is less than the tax rate of the first municipal corporation, then the credit described in Division D of this section shall be calculated using the tax rate in effect in the second municipal corporation, not to exceed 1/2 of 1%. Effective with the date of this ordinance and each year thereafter, a claim for refund or credit authorized under this ordinance shall be made in such manner as the tax administrator may, by regulation, provide. Section 16, requirements for joint economic development districts. Specific provisions of this ordinance may be modified as they apply to joint economic development districts if the modifications are passed by council in an ordinance which either specifically approves a joint economic development district contract or specifically amends this ordinance. This ordinance shall not apply to any person, form, or corporation, or to any property as to whom of which is beyond the power of council to impose the tax herein provided for. Any sentence, clause, section, or part of this ordinance, or any tax against or exception granted any individual or any of the several groups of persons or forms of income specified here is found to be unconstitutional or illegal or invalid. Such unconstitutionality, illegality, or invalidity shall affect only such clause, sentence, section, or part of this ordinance, and shall not affect or impair any of the remaining provisions, sentences, clause, sections, or other parts of this ordinance. It is hereby declared to be the intention of council of the Village of New Paris that this ordinance would have been adopted had such unconstitutional, illegal, or invalid sentence or part thereof not been included therein. Section 18, collection of the tax after termination of ordinance. This ordinance and model income tax ordinance 2011-05 shall continue effective insofar as the levy of taxes is concerned until repeal, and insofar as the collection of taxes levied hereunder and actions or proceedings for collecting any tax so levied or enforcing any provisions of this ordinance are concerned, it shall continue effective until all of the said taxes levied hereunder are fully paid, and any and all suits and prosecutions for the collection of said taxes or for the punishment of violations of this ordinance shall have been fully terminated subject to the limitations contained in section 11 and 12 hereof. B, annual returns due for all or any part of the last effective year of this ordinance shall be due on the date provided in section 5 and 6 of this ordinance, as though the same were continuing. Section 19, emergency clause. This ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of public peace, health, and safety, and it shall go into effect forthwith. The reason for the said emergency is the immediate necessity of levying the tax provided for herein in order to provide funds for the purposes of general municipal operations, maintenance, new equipment, extension and enlargement of municipal services and facilities and capital improvements of the Village of New Paris, Ohio, during the year 2011 and thereafter.
That's the first reading.
Okay, everybody close your votes, can I have popcorn? Can we just hit the play? Can we hit the play button?
I wish.
We'll do the short version next month.
Page 14, section 7. What do you got? No idea. Declaration.
Okay. You decide to leave.
Yes.
Well, no other business. The next meeting will be June 6, 2011 at 7 p.m. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Travis Earl,
Yes.
Gene Davies.
Yes.
Joe Bartle.
Yes.
Rick Van Winkle.
Yes.
Darrell Sabers.
Yes.
Earl Mullins.
Yes.
Larry Thomas.
Yes.
And Lovell Jerry. That's
Thank
a
you,
lot of reading.
Hey, listen, you wouldn't even read it, you want to give us a quiz?
I don't remember any.
I knew there was gonna be a lot of that.
That's a long time saying.
Word on that. You know, you can't try to make sense of it when you're reading it, you just have to read the word on the page.
I was seeing double just reading it, but
Yeah. you finally-
reading along with you guys.
Are we gonna have an emergency meeting then next month?
Three days.
We gotta have three. Huh?
We'll do 2 readings.
Just two?
When are you gonna get that done?
Didn't declare an emergency.
This is going into May.
So before we roll
Now,
on
Mary
this,
Jane, is it including
The second, third reading, we can highlight, didn't you, Logger say?
I mean, I can't.
since
finish that
we're
whole
all here, can't we vote to
thing.
amend?
Do what?
Is it legal to post just?
No, legally, you can't.
No, you gotta post the whole thing.
Declaration, I can't say that.
If we post,
Declaration,
do what?
Where can I hang 20?
Don't worry about where they're at.
It's not gonna-
You can hang one here. You know, if somebody wants to come in and read it.
Oh,
You can take one to the library, take it down